Hi guys, welcome back. It's Danielle, and today I'm going to go over my September wrap-up and my October TBR. So I don't have too many books for my September wrap-up this year. It was a really slow reading month for me, so I decided I am just going to combine my wrap-up and my TBR video. I haven't had a ton of time to film lately, and so I thought I'd just kind of get it all done at once. And I don't think it'll be too long of a video anyway. So without further ado, I'm going to talk about the two books that I read in September. So the first book I read was This Mortal Coil by Emily Suvada. This was a buddy read I did with Murphina Pier's Patreon group over on Patreon. And this is a YA science fiction post-apocalyptic book. And it is about a world where, it's about our world, but it's in the future where there are gene hackers who can go in and code people's DNA and can change almost anything about a person, their appearance, etc. based on programs that they can write for their DNA, and they can kind of implant them into them. And so that's kind of how this world works. And Kat, our main character, and her father are very good at gene hacking and at coding, DNA coding. And there is an outbreak of a virus during this book, and the virus, initially I thought it kind of turned people into zombies, and it does kind of turn them into a zombie-like stage in some ways, but it's not quite like a traditional zombie story like I thought it was going to be, which is okay because I'm not a super big fan of zombie stories, but I thought maybe it'd be one that I would like, but that's kind of beside the point. So there's this plague, and this virus has spread, and it causes cannibalism, but not in the way that you would think, and it's very interesting dynamic. This book is pretty gruesome. I would say that it maybe borderlines on horror. I don't read a lot of horror, which I'm hoping to fix a little bit this month. But I would say this book borderlines a little bit on horror, and there are definitely some like body horror type scenes in this, and maybe that's the wrong categorization because, like I said, I don't read a lot of horror, so I'm not super familiar with the subgenres. But anyway, Kat's father gets taken away by Cartaxis, which is this big corporation that kind of runs the government and runs everything, and then Kat has to survive on her own in the wilderness while her father's gone. And eventually a Cartaxis soldier is sent to her and tells her that her father has died. And she does not believe him, she doesn't trust him, she wants nothing to do with him. However, he has a message from her father saying that he has created a vaccine and she is the only one in the world who can unlock it. And they need to work together to unlock this vaccine. So that is kind of the main premise of the story. And then it follows Kat and Coil, the soldier, as they kind of work together and try and unravel what's the truth and what is lies, and kind of their past, both of their pasts and their history and all that, and kind of figure out who to trust and what to do with this vaccine if they can unlock it. I really enjoyed how fast-paced this book was. I read it really quickly. I listened to it on audiobook as well as followed along somewhat in my physical copy. I read the last 100 pages in the physical copy, and even though I listened to it mostly on audiobook, I actually preferred the physical copy more. I didn't love the narrator for the audiobook, but I think partially there is a romance in this, and it does kind of take over quite a bit of the story, and it is a fairly, I would say, YA romance, and so there are some parts that were definitely kind of cringy, and if I would have read them physically, I probably would have just skimmed over them and like not have been as bothered by them. But since I was listening to them on audio, I kind of had to listen to the full sentence and the full drawn out, like, this is what we're saying. It's a little cheesy, a little cringy. But other than that, I liked the world and the world building and the gene coding and all that. I am not super familiar with genetics. I have kind of a basic background in science, but It's not my strong suit when it comes to the body and medicine. Definitely more of a like macro systems person. So for me, the science didn't really need to be super accurate. It didn't really bother me all too much when if it wasn't accurate, which I was chatting with a couple people who said, like, if you kind of are down into the nitty-gritties of the science, it's not maybe the most accurate, but you can definitely tell that the author really wanted to take like genes and like computer coding and bring them together in this really cool way. And for me, I think she did a good job. I didn't have any problem with it. And I enjoyed the romance, even though it was cheesy. I did like it. So I'm the kind of person that tends to, if you put two characters together in a book, I'm going to ship it and be like, yep, I'm here for them. There was a little bit of a love triangle at one point, but I like where it went in the end. So I gave this Mortal Coil 3.5 stars. There is another book in the series. I thought it was just a duology, but apparently it is at least a trilogy, and the third one is not out yet. And so I would like to continue on in the series. I don't plan to do it this next month, and I don't know if I'll get to it before the end of the year, but I would like to continue on with the series. I do think this is one of the most beautiful covers I have ever seen on a book. However, after you read the book, this cover becomes much more disturbing. So it's both a good cover for the book and a beautiful cover, but also, like, when you put those two together, I'm not sure how I feel about it. So the other book that I read this month was The Hobbit, and I am so glad that I finally read this book. This was my third attempt to read The Hobbit. The first time I got maybe not even a third of the way in. The second time I got about halfway, and this time I finally finished the book. So I also read this as a buddy read over on Instagram. Linda Bookmania, she hosted a Hobbit read along this month, and so there was like a group chat for that, which was a lot of fun. And I also listened to this on audiobook. I will say, if you're going to listen on audiobook, make sure that you get the unabridged version, if that's the one you want to listen to, because there are a lot of abridged versions out there. There's a lot of versions of this audiobook and the Lord of the Rings audiobook out there. And I will put the name of the narrator and the company, I guess, that produced the audiobook that I listened to in the comments, so that it'll be the correct one if you go out and look for it. It is on Scribd. That's where I listened to both of these audiobooks on. That's where I listen to almost all of my audiobooks on, unless they're not available on Scribd, and then I get them on Libby. But The Hobbit is there and back again, Bilbo's journey with a group of dwarves to seek out the misty mountain the lonely mountain that holds the dwarves' kingdom that has been captured by a dragon, and all of the gold and all of the treasure has also been captured by the dragon. And it's just about the party's adventure as they go out and go on this journey to, one, just get to the mountain, and then two, to deal with the dragon, and then three, to deal with what happens after the dragon is dealt with and all these people want all this gold. That is basically the 3 parts of the movie, which they took a very tiny book and turned it into 3 very long movies. So I did watch the movies before reading this book, and I kind of wish that I would have read this book before I watched the movies, because I don't know, I had so many expectations of things that were going to happen from the movies that weren't in this book, which obviously is going to happen when you turn a 272-page book into 2 to 3 hour movies, so anywhere from 6 to 9 hours of movie content. Like, obviously they had to expand on something. And so I was like waiting for certain things that happened in the movie to happen in the book, and then they never happened. And it made me kind of sad. Like, I wish I would have read this first and then watched the movies, which now I'm nervous that that's how I'm going to feel when I read The Lord of the Rings, because I've already watched the movies. I can't go back on that. Just like I can't go back on watching all the Hobbit movies. But it's been a while since I watched the Lord of the Rings movies. The Hobbit movies I just watched like a few months ago. So these are really fresh in my mind. So I think for Lord of the Rings, since it's been a while, and I'm not going to do a rewatch, then I'll be okay going into those ones. But let's talk about The Hobbit, which is the book that I actually read. So, like I said, this book just follows Bilbo on his journey. I really liked the character growth that we saw in Bilbo. I really liked the companion of dwarves that he was with. I felt like we got to know at least a few key dwarves' personalities. Obviously, we couldn't get to know all of them because there's like 13 of them. And then Gandalf as well. He plays a decent role in this book, and we kind of get to know him and get to know a little bit about him. We get to see the world that J.R.R. Tolkien has created, and he does truly create a beautiful world with lots of fully formed characters. Bjorn is probably one of my favorite characters from this book. I really liked him, as well as Bilbo. I think those two, and in the end, Bard. I thought he was a pretty good character as well. I kind of felt like the ending could have been like a little longer, like the part with the dragon and the battle of the 5 armies and all that, but I feel like I only think that because I've seen the movies and they made that such a big part. So I don't quite know how to summarize my feelings of this book. I have a really hard time, like I said, separating it from the movie, because I just watched the movies, but I really think that this is well done. I think this was meant to be more of like a middle grade children's story, more so than The Lord of the Rings, and it's just kind of a fun adventure story, and I definitely can see that this kind of maybe is geared towards a little younger reader. There's lots of songs in here, and maybe there's lots of songs in Lord of the Rings. I don't know because I haven't read the books yet. But that was one thing I really liked about the audiobook, is the narrator would like sing the songs, and I don't know, I thought he had a decent voice and like brought them to life and whatnot. And so I don't know, I just found it to be a really beautiful story, and I really enjoyed it. I gave The Hobbit 4 stars. So those are the 2 books that I read in September, and now we'll move on to the books that I want to read in October. I have 6 books on my October TBR. Not sure that I'll get to all of them, but these are the books that I am most excited to read. I am not doing any readathons this month, even though it is Spookathon, and I'm probably going to want to participate. I don't know. I've done readathons the last several months, and it was going really good, and then slowly I've been getting worse and worse and worse with my readathons. So I'm just not going to put that pressure on myself, but I do have 3 buddy reads and then 3 non-buddy reads that I'm going to talk about today. The first book that I am going to be buddy reading is Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. This is a buddy read for Murphy Napier's Caravan group, which is open to anyone. I'm not quite sure how to link the Caravan, but I will link her video in which she links the Caravan and talks about it a little bit. This is a middle grade fantasy novel about a girl named Sophie who is cursed, and she seeks out the wizard Howl to help undo her curse, and Howl lives in a moving castle. That's pretty much all I know about this book. This is a Studio Ghibli movie as well, so I'm really excited to watch the movie after I read the book. I don't remember if I've seen this movie or not. I get this movie and Castle in the Sky mixed up, so I think I've seen this movie, but I'm not 100% sure. So I'm just going to go in, read the book, and then watch the movie after and kind of see how they compare. But Studio Ghibli movies are some of my absolute favorite movies. They mean a lot to me. Me and my brother watched them together growing up, and so I'm really, really excited to read this one. I'm hoping I can maybe convince my brother to read it with me as well. Next up on my buddy read list is Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. I am buddy reading this with Jen from the Book Refuge. I will link her channel down below as well, so you should definitely go check her out. and I wanted to read this book last month and just didn't get around to it, so I put it on this month's TBR, and then I saw that she was hosting a buddy read, so I thought it was a perfect time. It's nice and short. We both really like watching Murphy's channel, and this is one of Murphy's favorite books, so I think it'll be a great time of year to read Peter Pan too. I don't know why, but it just, I don't know, seems like a good time of year to read it. I'm sure everyone is familiar with the story of Peter Pan, so I won't go into it, but I am excited to read Peter Pan. And the last buddy read that I'm doing is for Murphy Napier's Patreon group, and that is going to be Red Sister by, I think it's Mark Lawrence. I'm not 100% sure though, and I didn't check before I started this video. This is a book about an assassin school that is run by nuns, and that is all I know about it. I do have a copy on hold at the library that's not here yet, but I also have it on Scribd, so I'm going to start listening to the audiobook and see how I like it. So those are kind of the 3 books that I am for sure reading this month and have definitely either started on or am starting very, very soon. So the other 3 books that I am reading, the first one is House of Salt and Sorrows. I don't have the dust jacket because I took it off to read the book, but there, I'll hold it like that. This is a YA fantasy novel about these sisters who live in a manor by the seaside, and the sisters keep dying. And there is one sister in particular who is kind of convinced that there's something else going on and is trying to figure out what is going on and why her sisters are dying, and maybe are they being murdered. But this is also a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses, which is actually a fairy tale I am familiar with. We had, when I was little, this CD which had fairy tales on it, that it was like an audiobook of just short fairy tales. And this was one of the ones that was on there, and so I listened to it a lot as a child. I couldn't quite tell you exactly everything that happens in the fairy tale, but I'm really excited to read a retelling because I have not read a 12 Dancing Princesses retelling, and it is actually a fairy tale that I am familiar with. So I did start this. I am only about a chapter in, but this was another one that I wanted to read last month and just didn't get to. But I've heard so many good things, and it seems like it's dark and kind of has some paranormal, scary horror elements to it. So I thought October would be the perfect time to read this book. The next book I decided to pick up is The Haunting on Hill House. The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I know absolutely nothing about this book. I know that it's a series on Netflix and that it's a haunted house story, and that's it. I got this in my owl crate, and it's short and kind of a classic horror book, and I don't read a lot of horror, and I want to because it's October and I have it, so I'm gonna read it. That's all I got for that one. And the last book on my TBR is Pet Semetary by Stephen King. I'm also waiting on this one from the library, so we'll see when that actually gets here. I am kind of hesitant to try Stephen King. I don't know that he will be an author that's for me. However, I have heard good things about Pet Semetary, and my brother just finished reading it, and so I want to talk to him about it and discuss it with him. He's not a big reader, but when he does read books, we tend to like the same thing. So I'm really excited to read this one and to see what I think of it. This is a book about a family that moves to a new town, and there is a cemetery where the kids bury all their pets. And I want to say the pets maybe come back to life, and then other creepy horror-y things start happening. So that is about all I know about it. I kind of feel like maybe going into horror books not knowing a ton about them is probably the way to go. So that's kind of my plan for those books. So let me know down below what books you guys are reading for October, if you have any horror scary recommendations, or if you think I definitely should try and get to any of these books, which ones I should prioritize. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, happy reading, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye!